Welcome to the Author Spotlight series at Spark Creativity. In this series, you'll hear from authors sharing their work directly into your classroom. So sit back and listen in. Today, we're hearing from Megan E Freeman, reading from her book, Alone. Megan E Freeman attended elementary school where poets visited her classroom every week to teach poetry, and she's been a writer ever since. Her best-selling novel in verse, Alone, won the Colorado Book Award, the Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont Children's Book Awards, is an NCTE notable verse novel, and is included on over 24 best of and state reading lists. Megan is also a Pushcart Prize nominated poet. Well, welcome to the show, Megan. I'm so delighted you're here to share some of your wonderful work with us.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I was hoping that before you read, you might be able to share just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my name is Megan E Freeman, and I live in Northern Colorado, where I have lived for most of my adult life. After graduate school, I moved there. And I have been a writer since I was in fifth grade. And when I was in elementary school, in fifth and sixth grade, we had poets that came into our classrooms every single week and taught us poetry and taught us to write poetry. And we would read each other's poetry and talk about poetry and listen to poetry. And they did this every single week with us for 3 years. And I fell in love with writing, and I fell in love with poems specifically. And even though when I grew up, I went and studied other things and I had other kinds of jobs, I've always been a writer and specifically a poet. And then when I was an adult and started thinking about writing books, I was actually in a book club, a parent-child book club with my daughter. And we read the book Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is a classic story from the author Scott Odell. And it was written about actually a true event that happened in the 1800s, where a young woman was left behind on an island when her entire community, her whole tribe and family evacuated the island and left and never came back. And she survived on that island alone for 18 years. And this part is all true. Wow. And then Scott Odell wrote a fictional imagining of her experience in the book Island of the Blue Dolphins, where he imagined what would it be like to have been this young woman, this young girl living alone on this island in the Pacific Ocean for 18 years, and what kind of challenges might she have had and what might her life have been like. So we read this book in our book club. This was in Colorado, where of course we don't have any oceans. We're completely landlocked. And the kids and I were talking about, and the other parents were talking about this incredible story. And the kids kept saying things like, well, how did she survive? And where would she know how to get food? And how would she know where fresh water was? Because they were thinking like Colorado kids, right? If we were dropped on an island in the middle of the ocean, we would have all those challenges. But it occurred to me, I said to them, this girl in the story, this was her home. This is where she had lived her whole life. She had spent her entire existence on this island. So it wasn't an alien landscape to her the way it might be to us if we were dropped on an island and had to survive. She knew her way around and was really comfortable there. But the challenges she faced were really different. They were psychological and emotional and some sort of spiritual challenges, and surviving for her was hard because of those kinds of challenges, not because she wasn't sure where to find fresh water. And I said to the kids in the club, so imagine if you came home from school tomorrow, these were middle schoolers, if you came home from school tomorrow and the entire neighborhood was abandoned, everyone was gone, you were the only person left in the town, what would that feel like? And what would you do? What would thrill you and what might terrify you? And what do you think those challenges would be? And so we had this whole other conversation about that question. And I couldn't get the question out of my head. I drove around for months afterward. Like I'd drive down the street and I'd look at the street and I'd think, okay, if I were 12 and I were alone and I was the only person here, what would it look like? And what would it feel like? And what would I do? And I couldn't shake the question. And that's the thing about writers, right? Is that when we get curious about something, we have to write about it. And it's not that we're special. Every human being has these impulses. They just show up differently. So I might be looking at a beautiful sunset, and a different person could look at that sunset and think, ooh, I want to paint that. or I want to make a dance and choreograph something about that, or I'm going to write music about that inspires me about this sunset. But for me, when I see that sunset, I want to write a poem, or I want to write a story or an essay. And so I had to write, and I had to write this story that became the book that we're talking about today, which is the book Alone, which is this reimagining of Island of the Blue Dolphins, but it's set in contemporary Colorado, suburban Colorado today, happening today.
And it's written in verse.
And it's written in verse. Yes, it's written in poems because I am a poet.
I'm so
Exactly.
excited because I love this book, and my son
Oh,
just read it and he loves this book, and now we're going to share it. So I'm just delighted that you're going to read a little bit for us now.
okay. I'm excited to read for you. So the premise is there's this 12-year-old girl named Maddie, and she and her two best friends decide they want to have a secret sleepover. And so they're going to do this by lying to their parents, right? So Maddie's going to tell her dad that she's spending the night at her mom's house, and she tells her mom she's spending the night at her dad's house. So they each think she's at the other person's house. But in fact, the real plan is that she and her friends are going to go to her grandparents' apartment, which is empty. Her grandparents are out of town. And they're going to have this secret sleepover with no adults. And they're going to just have a great time by themselves. And then the next day, they'll clean up and go home, and no one will be the wiser. But at the last minute, her two best friends have to cancel. They can't come. But at this point, Maddie's already told all these lies and sort of trapped herself in this web of deceit. And she decides, okay, I'm just going to take a night off for myself. I'll have a little sleepover, just me. And tomorrow I'll go home. Well, when she wakes up the next morning, the entire town has been evacuated and abandoned, and she has been left behind. So I'm going to read you some of the poems from this early section. So this first one is when she first wakes up and realizes something is not right. And the title of the poem is Panic. Speed dial. Mom, now. Voicemail. Mom, where are you? What's happened? I wasn't at Dad's last night. I stayed alone at Grandma's. Call me back, please, Mom. I'm really worried. Speed dial Dad now. Voicemail. Daddy, it's Maddie. Please call me right away. I don't know what's going on and I'm scared. Please call me, Dad. Emma. Voicemail. Ashanti. Voicemail. I text everyone. Nothing. Evidence. Oh, I should tell you. So she goes out on her bike, riding through the town, exploring to see if she can figure out what the heck is going on. Evidence. I pedal down the street toward the center of town. I ride around clothing, photo albums, potted plants, alarm clocks, baby toys, framed pictures, laptop cases, cell phone chargers, sleeping bags. I come to the parking lot for the park and ride on the corner by the megachurch. Half-packed suitcases lie open on the sidewalks. This must be where they loaded everyone onto the transports. What did Mom call it? The embarkation point? If the streets and sidewalks are any indication, it looks like people had to leave a lot of belongings behind. I coast around the street searching for any signs of anyone. Hello? Anyone here? Hello? Hello? Can anyone hear me? I get off my bike and turn in circles. I scan every direction for movement of any kind. Sounds come from the bus shelter. I run, hoping someone is still there. Place compromised devices here. At the shelter, labeled cardboard barrels overflow with cell phones. I hear a ringtone, run from one barrel to the next, dig inside to find the ringing phone. It stops. All I can hear is my own desperate panting. I sit down on the hard pavement surrounded by cell phones and abandoned luggage. I cry. A thought so terrible. I dig my own phone out of my pocket, speed dial Mom. It rings in my ear. A few seconds later, Scott Joplin's The Entertainer, Mom's special ringtone for me, comes from one of the barrels. I cry out. Eyes blurring and breath shallow, I speed dial Dad. A barrel rings. I dial Paul and Jennifer and Emma and Ashanti. The barrels keep ringing. All the cell phones have been left behind. Brain churn. What now? What now? What now? Bike 20 miles out to the interstate and try to find someone? Head north to the fire station and hope emergency crews are still there? Dial 911. I hold my breath and pray for a live person at the other end. 11 rings. You have reached a number that has been disconnected. Check the number and dial again. I call my grandparents in Texas. Abnormally heavy call volume could not be completed. Try again. Grave-faced news anchor echoes in my head. Temporary shelters in multiple jurisdictions. With all my heart, I do not want to think the next horrible thought that moves like a fast-growing cancer through my brain. The thought thinks itself anyway. What if my parents have been sent to different shelters in different places? And what if they each still think I am with the other? Without their cell phones, it could be days or even weeks before they realize I've been left behind. And there you go. That's how the story starts.
Oh my gosh, it's so dramatic. When the barrels all ring, I was just like, no.
Well, it's interesting because when you're writing a contemporary survival story, you have to, as an author, one of my challenges and opportunities to play was thinking about technology and how connected we all are and how hard it would be for something like this to happen today, right? Because
Yeah.
if you get lost or you are away from your family and something happens, you can just call them on your cell phone, or you ask a friend if you can borrow their cell phone, or you send them an email. We're so connected. You and I are in different parts of the world. We're on different continents. And here we are having this conversation in real time, right? It's an amazing
Yeah.
time to be a human being alive. And yet, if I want my character to really be stuck, I have to make sure she's completely isolated, not only physically, but technologically, because otherwise she doesn't have those same challenges.
Yeah. It's amazing how you just cut her off in one page, no 911, parents' phones in barrels, grandparents out.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
well, Megan, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing this excerpt with us.
Oh, it's my very great pleasure. And thank you for all you do for readers and authors.